It all begins in the land of Azure, with the mission 99% complete. A winged girl is hurled backward, but lands gracefully, saying the bastard still hasn't shown up. At this rate, they won't win. The ruler of this place, Ember, declares that everyone there will be annihilated today. No one will survive the rage and fury of his flames. The fairy is certain it's over, till a shield appears before her. Cedo, the level 96 healer, tells her to stop calling him a babysitter. The girl charges forward again, thinking she only needs to hold out until that person arrives. She's Heian Hitomi, ranked 3rd, and she's here to land a solid punch on the boss. However, the monster simply tells her that her efforts are futile. She unleashes her combo on the shield, and look at that, the damage stacks just like in the game. But apparently it doesn't do any good because she's hurled far back again. At that moment, she calls out to someone who appears right behind the boss, saying she can count on him. Where did that strike even land? It hit a rather peculiar spot on the boss. Then he vanishes, saying he's sure he dealt considerable damage. A second later, the boss is already in front of them, saying their speed can't compare to his, before launching an attack straight at them. The two fallen allies call out to their comrade, and that's when something snaps. The sword clashes with the boss's blade, and he smiles, saying he's finally arrived. The strongest of them all is now among them. The blonde man apologizes, saying the remaining forces gave him some trouble, but there's no need to worry. Kamahata Shizuya has arrived. He's the #1 ranked player, and the boss immediately charges in to strike him from behind, but he turns around just in time and blocks it. An all-out brawl erupts, with blows flying back and forth, while he throws out heals and mixes in gravity skills. The fight rages on, and Kamahata says he'll finish it in about 3 seconds. A golden lion appears in the sky, and it looks like he lands a direct hit on the boss's head as everything explodes around it. Well, not exactly the head. He actually blasts a crater straight through the boss's chest. And just like that, the Mapo Tofu Guild defeats the boss in record time. The sky clears, and everyone is amazed that the boss fell in a single strike. Nishi, the ninja, points out that they couldn't have won without his perfectly timed sneak attack from behind. Meanwhile, the healer watches, thinking it isn't just Guy's items and raw power, but also his judgment and understanding of the game, which are on a completely different level. It may have looked easy, but only someone who fully understands the system could create an opening like that. No wonder he's called the King of Azure. Then a window appears before Kamahata. He has completed all 100 out of 100 achievements. At last, he has everything, and as far as he's concerned, the game is over. But suddenly one final achievement appears: Omissions and Omnipotence. To unlock it, he must be the first player across all servers to complete everything. Right then, another game window appears, announcing that the servers will shut down in 5 seconds. When they log back in, new maintenance will begin. 5 seconds isn't much time to process that, but everyone seems excited to see the new expansion. Kamahata, however, is thinking about how much he'd like to see everyone again. But 5 days pass, and there's still no word from the game. The world's most famous game, an international sensation, vanished without a trace. Kamahata is furious because he was logged out before learning the true reward for completing everything. Online, everyone is upset, wishing their favorite game would return. A train stops at a station, and the protagonist sits there, feeling down as he reads the comments, until Soma tells him to check out a declaration of war. He opens it, and a streamer says she found something important about Azure's servers, involving the Mapo Tofu Guild. Apparently, they reached 101% in the completed missions ranking, which clearly suggests some kind of cheating. She wants the leader, Kamahata Shizuya, to explain exactly how that happened. The protagonist stands by the window, equally confused. He guesses it may involve those 100 achievements, but he has no idea. Suddenly, people on the train start asking, "What is that?" When he looks ahead, a massive portal has appeared inside the train. Oh, it's the classic omniscient reader's viewpoint moment. Something begins taking shape ahead. Strange digital patterns appear across his body. The train brakes hard, throwing everyone around. In an instant, a slash cuts through, spraying blood. The protagonist remains confused. What the hell is happening? From the wall struck by the slash, a knight emerges. What the hell? Take it easy, Game Master. What's going on? Sung Jinwoo didn't have to face anything like this until 10 chapters in. And it isn't alone. An entire squad pours into the train. Everyone runs, but the creatures are already upon them. What chance do these poor passengers have? The swords are bigger than their bodies. Oh no, are they really going to kill the cute girl on the train? She is sliced clean in half. And here I thought our dear protagonist would do something heroic. But no, he's just standing there wide-eyed. He'd better snap out of it, because while he's wondering what's going on, the creature is already moving in to strike him too. He only dodges because he's seen that technique before. The creature is already flipping through the air, It only just opened the portal. Calm down already. Worst of all, it seems to be using a technique similar to one he used himself. The trick to dodging it is to rush forward and slip underneath. The monster stares him down, and he realizes it's exactly what he expected. Kamehara Shizuya is level 1 with no class, but he holds the title Omission and Omnipotent. The creature before him is a level 35 commander, and the move it used was Lion's Slash. Emerging from the worm's territory, he immediately wonders which route offers the shortest way out. He knows he's probably in what the game called the Worm Dungeon. The problem is, the beast has locked onto him. So the moment it bursts out of that thing, he's forced to run again. But our boy doesn't stand a chance. How can he win one-on-one when it's level 1 against level 35? Still, he says that for some reason he forgot he was in the real world at that moment. His mind didn't register that a single mistake could cost him his life. Instead, he found himself eager to seize the opportunity. He hadn't played in a while. Well, by a while he means 5 days. What a hopeless addict. The monster is about to land a hit, but he says it's a shame for the beast. It's game over as the worm bursts out and devours it. Apparently he knew exactly when that worm would emerge, or at least that's how it seems. He says he gambled on it, and the gamble paid off. He immediately pulls out his phone, worried about his friends. Everyone is obviously talking about alarms going off, but his battery is down to 8%. And to make matters worse, another squad of level 30 creatures is heading his way, so he needs to move fast. At least the game is generous enough to include auto loot. Items are collected automatically. The drop is a level 25 sword with absurd stats, and he says something this powerful shouldn't exist at the start of the game. Then a message appears asking whether he wants to activate Hatred Pursuit. That's a skill used to recover items stolen from you. Oh, it turns out he didn't activate it. The monster used it on him for stealing its sword. Even so, he equips the sword and briefly thinks he has reached level 8. Maybe his stacks were reduced, or perhaps it's because of his omnipotent title. Either way, the moment he wields the sword, he unlocks the commander's skills. He immediately activates Flag of Courage, which boosts his speed and keeps accelerating him, though it rapidly drains mana. The problem is, his only offensive move is Lion's Slash. He can use it 3 times in a row, but it isn't strong enough to deal meaningful damage. Since he can't hurt them, he uses it for mobility instead, leaping down the stairs. But those damn creatures are right behind him. This game is seriously trying too hard. Then he fakes a jump and hides. Looking at the sword, he knows it's the only reason he's still alive. Strangely, he's seen this item in the game before, but this version is far stronger. The downside is that Hatred Pursuit will soon activate again, allowing the monsters to track him once more. The entire train is crawling with shadows, like something straight out of Sung Jinwoo's world. He realizes this is insane. Even the game was never this difficult. Then he spots a stone like the ones that marked respawn points in the game. But now monsters seem to be respawning there instead, which is strange because it should be players. Then it clicks. The monsters have human-like abilities, drop items and respawn. Apparently, instead of humans hunting monsters, the entire game has been reversed, which is terrible because it means the creatures can spawn endlessly. Now he'll learn what life is like for a monster that kills a player, only to watch them return hundreds of times. With that in mind, he refuses to stand still and die. After all, he has the best chance of surviving. No one knows this game better than he does. Even if the enemy is like an immortal player, and even if he only has 1 life, he will survive. After descending several flights of stairs, he searches for the worm dungeon. Just ahead, he finds a path to a C-rank area, perfect for the beginning of the game. That's because he knows a way to push deep into the dungeon and clear it without ever facing the boss. The problem is, if the trick he used in the game doesn't work here, he'll have no choice but to fight it head on, and his chances of winning are practically 0. Worse than facing the boss, however, is dealing with the pack of mites chasing him again. The game really has been reversed. He must run for his life, create some distance, and only then start farming the dungeon. The problem is, a swarm of worms joins the chase during his escape. At this rate, they'll catch him. Finally, he spots a way out. Once again, he uses Lion's Slash to leap, dive through a small opening inside. He finds the Tears of Furov. A single drop falls, adding plus 0.00 to his stats. At that moment, Furov's trial begins, and the creature's power seeps into his body. Just like in the game, 1 drop falls every 5 seconds, granting 1 stat point every 100 seconds. By staying there for 3 full days, he can gain around 50 points. It makes sense in a game to stand still for 3 days while everyone else levels up. Though with monsters this strong, everyone is probably dying instead. Sure enough, people are already being torn in half. Shizuya begins wondering what these memories are. Another memory strikes him, this time showing the first girl who died on the train. It feels as though something is debuffing his mental state. It's yet another strange difference between the game and reality. Then a strange voice begins calling out to Shizuya. His friends are smiling, until they suddenly become a pile of twisted corpses, telling him he's too late. He jolts awake, realizing it's all part of Ferov's trial. As the drops fall, mental attacks begin assaulting him. He must stay calm and farm as many stacks as possible. 2 days have already passed. He only needs to endure one more, but then a blade slices across his chest. When he turns around, he sees one of the soldiers and wonders whether this is the end. No ordinary human could defeat a creature that much stronger, especially one with player-like traits and infinite revives. Maybe it's time to give up. Humanity doesn't stand a chance against something like this. But no, he's the strongest player. Even at a low level, he won't lose to early game mobs. He lets out a shout, and of course, it turns out to be another mental attack. That's when Ferov recognizes him, making him one with the species. He relaxes when he sees his chest is completely unharmed. It was only an illusion. It seems he has farmed all he can here, so it's time to leave. Since he's now one of their kind, the worms shouldn't attack him in theory. But the boss appears directly behind him. The creature stares him down, but instead of attacking, it lays an egg on the ground. It's a worm essence, and for some reason he worries it will hatch into a lowly, because lately every egg seems to produce one of those cursed little girls. But this isn't just an egg. He can eat it to restore his health, thank goodness. As soon as he leaves the dungeon, he sees that most higher level creatures have moved on, leaving only level 20 knights. He is now level 25 after his time inside, and with the extra stats and sword, he can handle them. He begins by slicing 3 or 4 of them cleanly in half with Lion Slash. Another charges at him with a shield bash, but he uses the flag's sprint skill to dash away. Then an arrow flies toward him, but he keeps burning mana to maintain the skill, and sidesteps out of its path. Fire extinguisher explodes nearby, and he realizes he can't stay here long, even at a similar level. These creatures are endless and seem to possess some degree of organization. While he's thinking, one bursts straight through the wall above him. This time it isn't an illusion, and it lands a direct hit on his shoulder. He falls back, realizing he let his guard down. Then he notices the monster holding a portal stone, another player-type item. Several of the creature's allies immediately appear beside it. The problem is, he's injured and has no way to dodge. But once again, the giant worm saves him. Since he's now part of their species and is under attack, the creatures rush to defend him. Grateful, he says he survived by the narrowest possible margin. At least he still has the egg that can restore his health. Then he notices that the portal stone has fallen to the ground. He tells the worms to consume the item and move at high speed. He needs them to create a distraction so he can escape, and the worms surge through the tunnels, tearing through the players. By killing those monsters, he reaches level 17 and collects more weapons. These weapons have no class restrictions, probably because of his power and omnipotence title. He knows the creatures are just like players and will respond, so he makes a run for it. Outside, evacuation signs fill the city, and everyone shouts for people to flee the creatures. A poor mother clutches her child while a knight and another beast spin a massive ball on its back. And of course, some upstanding citizens seize the chaos as a chance to loot. Meanwhile, a girl wearing headphones sings to herself in a diner. While everyone else is stealing, she honestly walks up to pay. She may not be all there, because she strolls down the street with her phone held high, complaining about the terrible signal. "Hey monster, over here." There's a lunatic waving her headphones around. Suddenly, someone grabs her arm, yanks away her headphones, pins her against the wall, and tells her to stay quiet. Monster passes by, and only then does she notice the complete carnage throughout the city. But a level 25 shadow assassin notices them and rushes toward the pair. The hooded guy tries to play the hero, but the creature triple jumps to close the distance. It reaches for his neck, and he warns the girl to be careful. When she turns around, the man has blocked the attack. It's Shizuya himself, slashing the creature's arm. The monster leaps back and fires, forcing him to deflect the shot. These enemies are seriously trying too hard. Fighting them is anything but easy. Even though Shizuya is a top-tier player, the creature crouches low and evades his slash. Meanwhile, the cursed TikTok queen is busy recording a video. He tells her to stop acting stupid, then pulls her along and says they need to escape while they can. He keeps scolding her, saying she's an idiot who needs to understand their situation. But she claims the monsters won't attack her anyway. He's taken aback, but she dismisses it as nothing, which isn't suspicious at all. Then she asks about his tattoo, and he tells her that a lot has happened. After picking up a weapon from the creatures, he gained the same power they possessed. Now he's trying to understand why he received it. Sometime later in another part of the city, the two are climbing a mountain. It's still unclear why he saved this e-girl, but let's see where this goes. She's impressed that he knows the entire route. Though the truth is, the city's layout is strangely similar to the game's starting map. That probably means the game was modeled after reality. She asks why he's heading somewhere so abandoned, and he tells her to stop following him. What a pair of weirdos. He dragged her away to save her, and now she's following him while they argue. She tells him to call her Kokumin Ichijo and says she's following him because it looks like fun. But at that moment, his foot passes through a barrier, revealing a hidden cave. Inside, she asks what's happening. The air feels strange, but he tells her to be quiet. At the tunnel's far end is a cluster of lights that resemble stars. No, on closer inspection, they're muzzle flashes. They aren't firing at him. They're shooting at the monsters ahead, who have heavy shields and healers in the rear. It's basically a hunting party, except the hunters are monsters, and our protagonist is behind them, relieved that the enemies are only level 18 and don't seem very experienced. Since they're distracted, he may be able to take them out. He advances and Ichijo warns him to be careful. Hunters mistake him for one of the monsters and immediately open fire, but he uses Lion's Leap and lands behind them, then slashes the healer. The tank and another fighter at the front immediately turn toward him. The shield bearer attacks, but he dodges by jumping. That leaves the healer exposed, and they are mowed down. The monsters turn toward one another, raising a barrier, only for it to be destroyed immediately. But once it falls, the humans can no longer see the creatures. Shizuya steps in, saying the monsters retreated, and there's no need to waste more bullets. Really? Why let them escape? Wasn't the whole point of coming here to kill them? Out of nowhere, the woman he just saved points a gun at him. Ichijo intervenes, telling her not to shoot because she's certain he's human and he saved her. The soldiers exchange glances and say they'll discuss it further inside. Deeper in the cave, a whole group of exhausted people lies around. Ichijo is the only one who still looks cheerful, clearly suspicious. The soldiers explain that monsters chased them during a mission, leaving them trapped here. The protagonist says trying to protect so many people is insane and impossible. The woman replies that she can't kill every monster either. They aren't refusing to let him leave. This is simply one of those beginner dungeons that must be completed. No one can leave until it's cleared. The boss consists of level 15 twins, which doesn't sound too terrifying at first. Problem is, the man is incredibly durable, while the woman is extremely accurate with her shots. Hearing this, the protagonist gets a headache as the pieces finally come together. Everything from the game has spilled into reality, and now the tables have turned. The monsters are the players. In the name of justice, they're here to wipe out humanity. What he doesn't understand is why such a twisted game is happening at all. The soldiers place soda cans on the ground to detect approaching monsters. When a creature steps on them, they'll know it's coming. The energetic Ichijo says she'll check while the soldiers begin evacuating everyone. She peeks around a rock and sees 5 approaching monsters. And worst of all, they're always so well organized. The protagonist says that now the civilians are safe, it's time to handle this. The enemies range from level 20 to 25. The archer shoots an arrow into the ceiling, where it functions as a light source. The protagonist charges forward, saying he only needs support while he deals with the backline. He heads toward the shield bearer, as the strange-looking mage at the front conjures 3 fireballs, launching explosion after explosion and forcing him to dodge. He closes in on the shield and uses that leaping technique once again to land behind them. The soldiers continue firing as he cuts through the first target. To an experienced player like him, creatures with only basic skills are easy prey. The archer fires an arrow that initially looks easy to dodge until it curves mid-flight, revealing itself as a precision shot. The entire group, the archer seems to be the only one with real experience. But then a sudden explosion throws the cave into chaos. The soldiers keep firing while asking whether he's okay. He says he's fine, but something troubles him. The monsters are improving as the fight continues. He strikes the mage again and reaches the obvious conclusion. Like players, they evolve because they can learn. To make matters worse, the mage he's trying to kill is instantly healed by the woman in the rear. Even among monsters, the healer is a woman. The stereotype survives. Shizuya wants to close the distance, but their formation is solid, with the archer constantly protecting the healer. The only way through is for the soldiers to create an opening. But in the middle of that thought, the tank slams him with a shield bash, smashing him into the wall. If the number 1 player is struggling this badly, the rest of the world may already be gone. Seeing his own blood, he considers using some of the soldiers as bait to distract the enemy and secure victory. In the game, people could respawn, so he wouldn't have hesitated, but these are real people. Meanwhile, among the evacuees, Ichijo gives a lollipop to a little girl, telling her to stop crying, or she'll become wrinkled and ugly. Out of nowhere, she asks where the girl's parents are. The child plainly says they became monster food. Back in the battle, endless gunfire continues, but our boy still can't reach the backline. He says he'll try one more time, activates Flag of Courage, and burns mana as he charges forward. but as an arrow flies toward him, he quietly apologizes. At the same time, the little girl asks Ichijo whether the soldiers will die. Shizuya dodges, and the arrow ricochets, striking a soldier directly in the chest. The woman beside him is speechless, while Shizuya explains that unfortunately, defeating these player-type enemies requires sacrificing someone. He knows the game has a kind of link system between people, and once that link breaks, they tend to lose focus. The woman cries out to the man who was struck, but Shizuya tells them there is no time to mourn. She drops down, grabs a gun and a bag of dynamite, then throws it toward the monsters, unloading bullets and setting off explosions like a madwoman. This guy is practically following Sung Jinwoo's style, letting others take the fall so he can swoop in and win. But when the smoke clears, the poor woman falls to her knees, devastated by the loss of her husband, partner, or perhaps close friend. And suddenly, he rises, coughing. It turns out Shizuya wasn't reckless. He had judged the situation. Flag of Courage boosts more than speed. It also raises nearby allies' defense and maximum HP, and he knew the man could survive the hit. The man stands there bewildered, staring at the dead monsters without knowing what happened. The woman elbows him in the chest, causing something to fall to the ground. She picks it up. It's a ring. The poor man had been planning to propose, but seriously? In the middle of the apocalypse, she's suddenly overcome with emotion, and he blushes as he pulls her into a hug, while Shizuya smiles faintly in the background. The blue-haired oddball thanks everyone for surviving. Seeing that, Shizuya thinks this may not be the end of humanity. Perhaps they still have a chance to win. That optimism vanishes 30 minutes later when a massive creature appears with blood covering its foot. In the next chapter, a long-haired man flatly refuses to participate. He says he won't leave and only entered the cave because everyone knew it was safer. The soldiers desperately ask for help, but no one is willing to step forward. The black-haired woman says they must leave because the creatures won't stop coming. It's only a matter of time before everyone dies. Shizuya steps in and confirms it, saying they'll return soon and worse, they'll be even stronger. The long-haired man replies that they may as well die now, since those things will never stop coming. Then he asks why they should trust someone whose powers look exactly like the monster's abilities. Ichijo tells him to shut up, pointing out that he's criticizing the one person who saved him. If he wants to stay, fine. He can die like a stray dog. The soldiers tell everyone to calm down. Those who want to leave should follow them, while the rest can remain and wait for backup. The long-haired man scoffs, saying no one will go because everyone has seen how dangerous it is outside. But then the cute, timid little blonde girl says she'll go with the soldiers. Strangely, that inspires the rest of the group, who decide following her is better than staying, especially since the monsters will return. Naturally, once everyone begins leaving, the long-haired man says he must go too to protect them. Everyone gathers what little they have, and 5 minutes later they set out. Along the way, Ichijo asks how the protagonist knew the monsters would revive when nothing like this had ever happened before. He casually replies that it was only a correlation, though he's actually considering two enormous problems. First, if the monsters are like players, they'll keep gaining stats and growing stronger with new equipment. Second, and worse, they'll revive endlessly until he finds a way to stop them. Meanwhile, the creatures only need to kill them once, just as a player only needs to clear a dungeon once. In theory, the system is designed to ensure they never have a real chance of winning. Soldier remarks that Shizuya is remarkably calm. That would make sense if he were a soldier, but he isn't. Even this highly trained soldier's hands are trembling, because he's physically and mentally exhausted. The protagonist asks why he's pushing himself so hard. Well, because he'll die if he doesn't. What other reason could there be? Shizuya tells him to abandon everyone else. His odds of surviving with only that woman would be far higher than protecting the entire group. The soldier agrees but says he has no intention of doing that. Suddenly they reach the national crest, where the old emblem once stood. They're certain something is approaching. The soldier tells Shizuya that if only the two of them remain, he should take the girl and run. Hearing this, Ichijo asks about Katana, the blonde girl from earlier. The man explains that she's always with Akina now. As tough as Officer Akina is, she can't resist the little girl. Apparently an illness in Akina's childhood left her unable to have children. And just like that, the story's emotional tone completely reverses. But his heartfelt explanation is suddenly interrupted by an arrow from nowhere. Shizuya is about to warn everyone when blood splashes across his face. Everyone turns and freezes. The blonde girl has been struck directly in the chest. She collapses, lifeless. The woman close to her screams Katana's name and tries to rush forward. Everyone else follows, telling her to calm down. They remember that the enemy archer is far too skilled to miss his target and accidentally hit a child, so the shot must have served another purpose. The female soldier fires a round into the archer's back, shouting that she'll kill the bastard. who murdered the child. Another man tries to pull her away, while Shizuya shouts for them to leave, but they're crushed in that instant. Shizuya wonders how he could have forgotten. Steve golems were once allies of the player's faction in this world. They served as guardians at dungeon entrances, preventing enemies from escaping through the gates. But now that they're no longer allied with the players, they've become enemies. The golem raises its foot, reducing the people beneath it to paste. One of the monsters approaches, absorbs what remains, and even receives the title Conqueror of the Hidden Cave. Shizuya can't believe these bastards receive dungeon rewards for killing humans. To these monsters, humans are merely nameless creatures. They probably see human hatred, emotions, and everything else as nothing more than scripted game mechanics. Since that's how things are, Shizuya activates omnipotence and omniscience. The system warns that 2 players will hunt him for 7 days. He continues activating more abilities, and now 4 players will pursue him. He begins detecting scattered loot, along with defensive skills from the Guardian class. The enemy archer appears ready to act, but in the next instant, Shizuya launches a fireball. Since he's carrying equipment from multiple classes, he can apparently use magic too, and the archer is torn in half. Shizuya demands to know whether the bastard understands the pain of those left behind. He keeps scanning and receives a flood of memories, along with the items belonging to the 2 people crushed earlier. Everything seems to be absorbed. As the others leave the cave, someone asks what that thing was, clearly referring to the giant golem. Then the ring from earlier appears in Shizuya's hand. He says he'll carry on Akina and Takuto's will. Whatever mission they had, he'll complete it himself. Observing the golem, he notes that it's level 40 with 50% damage reduction. Its intelligence is low, but it's violently aggressive, and a frontal assault would be suicide. He sidesteps an attack and activates rapid fire, unleashing a barrage directly into its face. But when the smoke clears, the creature is completely unharmed, and it fires a laser at him. He dodges again, while the golem continues launching attacks in every direction. Since Shizuya killed those enemy players earlier, he can now summon their shield, but it doesn't help much. The shield shatters instantly, sending him flying. Chijo shouts for him to be careful, while he wonders why the evacuation is taking so long. Worse still, the golem is preparing a crushing blow, and he has no time to heal or dodge. Chijo steps forward, yelling for everyone to move back, but trips and falls flat, and instead of attacking, the golem suddenly stops and turns away. Shizuya can't understand why. Normally these monsters only protect players. Either way, he can't rest. He heals himself, saying he must protect the evacuees. He leaps onto the golem's hand and begins climbing its arm. Even the strongest creature must have a weakness. Once he reaches its back, he drives a strike into the center of its spine. The golem swings a massive hand toward him, but he rolls away and regains his footing. And what is that? Light erupts everywhere, sending the monster berserk. For a moment, it looks like Shizuya made it explode. But no, it's a skill sweeping across the entire forest from afar. Speaking of afar, a knight watches the entire battle unfold. Do we get to see what happens next? No, suddenly we're in a helicopter as someone reports that 72 hours have passed since the shadow invasion began. A soldier steps on a creature and says it's already dead. Another covers his face and suggests the enemy may have self-destructed. But the girl carrying the massive hammer says that's impossible. No one except those 2 could push the monsters this far. The green-haired man begins to speak, but then looks back after sensing a presence. A towering knight is approaching. The woman looks intrigued, saying elite monsters are always exciting. He looks strong, which should make for excellent entertainment. Her companion apologizes to the creature, explaining that Satsuki is difficult to stop once she gets excited. She's already leaping forward and swinging her axe when an arrow is fired. The monster reacts instantly, and in the very next moment, she's on the ground, while its blade rests against her companion's neck. He's stunned. This monster is unlike anything they've fought before. But then the creature notices something and turns toward the city, where an explosion is erupting. Satsuki shouts for it to stop underestimating her and launches a final strike. Her friend remarks that the monster may have found a more interesting target. Meanwhile, the protagonist opens his eyes in what appears to be a baby's room filled with teddy bears and shelves. While everything looks cute and cozy, he rises in confusion, then notices that his hand is entirely metal. He wonders whether Omnipotence rebuilt his body using one of the golem's abilities. Checking his status window, he sees that he really did acquire the golem's skills. One skill lets him enter a revenge state whenever something nearby dies, granting him greater power. He immediately decides to get up. After all, the most important thing is learning how he ended up here. Suddenly, the smell of food drifts in, accompanied by horribly off-key singing, so awful that he wants to cover his ears. And apparently eggs are the only thing this strange girl knows how to cook. She tells him to wait a moment because breakfast will be ready soon. He can't understand why she's behaving as though life is peaceful. Opening the window is enough to see everything outside being destroyed. Judging by appearances, she's probably a player from the monster's world. After all, when she fell before him earlier, a green ally marker appeared above her. She finishes the toast and he says it tastes delicious, but refuses to eat it. She laughs and tells him to stop lying. She knows it tastes awful because even she disliked it. Luckily, she has enough cup noodles stocked for an entire week. He asks how he got here, and she says the answer is obvious. After he passed out, she found a cart, dragged him upstairs, and brought him home. Finally, Shizuya states the obvious. Something about her feels strange. He can't sense even the slightest trace of anxiety from her. It's almost as though she isn't remotely worried about being killed. She admits it, saying she already tried. But for some reason, the monsters simply won't attack her. Everything around her was destroyed, with everyone killed and absorbed, yet the monsters acted as if she were invisible. She even threw a rock to get one's attention, but it completely ignored her. He guesses it may be a special power, perhaps something like his own hand. He asks whether she can see a floating status window, but she says no. Then out of nowhere he decides to reveal everything, drawing his weapons and explaining that he believes his powers are tied to a game called Azure Land. He briefly explains the game, but she says she doesn't understand any of it. What she does understand is that her ability is amazing, because she's very unlikely to die. Shizuya ignores her answer and focuses on the real problem. Humanity has almost no chance of survival. He says he must travel to Rinkai, then to a place called Kaijo. He has important allies there and must make sure they're safe. She looks at him and says that in that case, she'll accompany him. He says staying alone would be wiser, since her chances of survival would be far higher than if she came with him. But she collapses onto the table, saying that yes, she can do anything, yet she doesn't know what she actually wants. Besides, he doesn't seem like someone who would die easily. In the middle of all this tension, they suddenly hear a strange noise at the door, as though someone outside is trying to break the lock. Instead of preparing for a fight, the airhead heads to the bedroom as though they're playing hide and seek. Shizuya brings the milk inside, wraps a bandage around his arm, and opens the door, only to find 3 people standing outside. He asks who they are. The man in the cap apologizes, saying he didn't realize anyone was inside. Shizuya tells him it's fine, and understands they're probably only trying to survive, but the man is clearly hiding a small weapon behind his back. Then the blonde man steps forward, saying they've been fleeing monsters and finally found someone. They need help because it's raining and creatures are everywhere. Shizuya maintains a confident tone, telling them not to hesitate and to make themselves at home. They ask whether they can enter, and he says he'll bring them drinks. From the bedroom, Ichijo hears one of them say they're going to the bathroom. As soon as Shizuya serves the drinks, blonde man comments on his arm. Shizuya says he fell while fleeing the monsters and is in rough shape, especially in a world like this. The man in the cap remarks that living alone must be difficult, especially with so many supplies. Shizuya says he likes to stay prepared and never imagined buying so much instant ramen would pay off. Then he asks what their plan is in this insane world. The man in the cap says they're searching for a safe place filled with supplies, exactly like Shizuya's home. Shizuya replies that 4 people would make such a small room far too crowded. The man agrees, then says it would be perfect with 1 fewer person. That's when he realizes his mistake. Shizuya's arm transforms, and the steel before him is torn apart like paper. Another attacker reaches for a gun, but Shizuya delivers a swift kick. A third tries to attack Shizuya from behind, but a blade strikes his neck, leaving him gasping for air. The blonde bastard even has the nerve to ask whether Shizuya invited them in just to ambush them. Shizuya simply says they were unlucky because he's a monster now. He crushes the man's real weapon and tells him that, unfortunately, they'll have to pay the price for coming inside. But then someone orders him to stop. When he looks back, it's obvious that the threat is meaningless. A knife is now held to Ichijo's neck, and the attacker warns that she'll die if Shizuya moves. Shizuya realizes it was foolish to assume she was safe simply because monsters wouldn't attack her. That made him forget the most dangerous creature when society collapses. The true monster is a human. As he radiates killing intent, the woman holding Ichijo begins trembling. They heard noises and expected to find valuables, never imagining they'd encounter someone with a transformed arm. Shizuya decides to pretend to negotiate, suggesting a hostage exchange. The woman refuses, saying they'll take the hostage and 3 boxes of supplies. But before she can finish, something pierces straight through her chest. Shizuya immediately pulls Ichijo away and tells her to get clear. At first, it looks like a perfectly calculated attack, born from his 200 IQ, but no. It's actually a level 41 noble, and the woman is literally sliced apart. In Azure Land, whenever a monster, creature, or anything else is killed, it drops its items and enters a state of hatred. In that state, taking revenge restores everything it lost. Could this be the golem? What is this monster doing here? Regardless, Shizuya tells Ikijo to stay back, even though she's supposedly immortal. As the blonde man is reduced to jelly and the knight charges straight at Shizuya. Honestly, I expected him to dodge or pull off some quick maneuver. Instead, he simply raises his shield and is sent flying from the building. Even in midair, the monster is already following up with another attack. He activates quick mana to form a weapon in his hand and fires several shots. The monster dodges them. Shizuya lands and slides, then rushes into the building ahead as the creature attacks from behind, racing up the stairs. That single block dealt far more damage than he expected. On the second floor, he briefly stops to heal himself. He's combining items, skills, and everything else he has collected. But he's still nowhere near ready to face an elite monster head-on. Creature begins climbing the stairs, surrounded by a heavy aura. Shizuya activates his weapon and fires again, but the monster completely ignores the shots and continues, climbing at a steady pace, until a precision shot flies in. When the monster moves to block it, Shizuya appears behind it and lands a clean strike, but nothing happens. He nearly gets caught by the counterattack. Though he's at least skilled at evading and escaping, he retreats, firing as he moves. He's exploiting a mechanic from the game. Maps are designed with 2B logic, meaning that on a higher floor, the monster can't tell whether he's above or below. It only knows he's nearby. The monster keeps climbing until it steps into a pool of gasoline. Shizuya appears again and throws a fireball. Credit where it's due, he's trying everything. The explosion sets 3 floors ablaze, and he continues firing. But even after all that, the monster calmly keeps moving forward because a healing ability sustains it. Its partner is supporting it from outside. Shizuya keeps climbing and shooting. At least this monster moves as slowly as a turtle. He realizes surviving the train battle was pure luck, made possible by knowing the enemy's skills. He overestimated himself by thinking he could face this creature directly. Then he notices lightning in the sky and seems to get an idea. He runs toward a door while outside. Ichijo holds a tiny knife, clearly thinking she can somehow help. From the sounds inside the building, she knows Shizuya is there. Then she notices a strange monster nearby with green energy streaming from it. She guesses it may be influencing the fight somehow. But what can she do? She spots a nearby car and jumps in, grips the steering wheel, shifts gears, locks her gaze on the target, and floors the accelerator. Since the small creature is technically a player, it's about to be sent to another world. Meanwhile, Shizuya stands his ground on the rooftop, waiting for the boss, which appears with an even greater buff. He sighs, saying that unfortunately he's surrounded. The boss charges. Shizuya beckons it forward, saying he's ready. But strangely, something else appears to be, aiming at both the monster and him. Damn, another creature is lining up a shot with a bow. Then another player finally appears. It's Satsuki, asking who the hell the archer thinks it's aiming at before, slamming her weapon down onto its head. Bow goes flying, but the creature remains unharmed. These monsters can absorb absurd amounts of damage. Satsuki challenges it to a duel. If it survived the first hit, then it must take the second. But the monster dodges and leaps from the building, firing grappling hooks and swinging toward another one, making a full Batman-style escape. She curses after it, saying it has no fighting spirit, and complains that the battle on the other building looks much cooler. That battle is definitely one-sided. Shizuya spends most of it dodging, while trying to land occasional hits. Spoke too soon, he manages to stab it, but naturally the wound heals instantly. It's all thanks to an overpowered skill called Sync's Breath. It links the caster to the target, and until that connection breaks, the monster cannot be killed. Without giving him time to rest, the monster attacks again. Shizuya knows he cannot win while the healer remains standing. But just as the creature prepares a downward strike, he notices that the connection is broken. Looking down, he sees the priest slumped over after someone rammed it with a car. It was Ichijo, scratching her head after completely stunning the monster. Better still, she realizes the creature has no interest in attacking her. In that case, she'll hit the gas again. But then an arrow whistles past her and slams into the monster's chest. When she looks back, she sees the hunter from earlier. Impressed that a civilian chose to fight, still, he warns her not to get too involved or she'll die. Meanwhile, on the top floor, the protagonist steps back and dodges another attack. But the monster refuses to relent and leaps in again, forcing him forward to avoid Lion's strike. This opponent isn't stupid though. He tries the same maneuver as before, only to receive a crushing stomp to the spine that sends him stumbling. He nearly falls from the roof. Even though he already knows how quickly these creatures adapt, it still shocks him. Unlike in a game where nothing changes, the longer humanity takes to defeat these enemies, the harder they become to kill. The monster launches another attack. Shizuya says he knows there's still a chance to win. Right then, lightning finally strikes the top of the building, hitting the creature directly and leaving it smoking. The noble is paralyzed and close to death. Its sword falls to the ground as it collapses face first onto the asphalt. Shizuya remarks that it's unfortunate the creature doesn't understand how stages work. This time it lost because of rules belonging to a world it didn't understand. Did he use a secret technique or special game ability? No, it was pure science. Metal at the highest point in the city attracted the lightning. He walks over and admits it wasn't some genius plan. He just got lucky that the enemy was made of metal and the building was the tallest around, and that it happened to be raining. But that's the life of a player. You take risks and claim the rewards. A sword through the ribs finishes it off. The level 41 noble is dead. But unlike the others, its body strangely doesn't disappear. The scene cuts to someone asking if enough is enough already. Cracks begin forming nearby, and she tells whoever is hiding to come out if they're so eager to kill humans. The wall explodes, revealing Satsuki chasing her target and yelling at him to stop running. But right then an arrow flies straight toward her face, and she barely dodges it. She yells at him to stop using traps. The archer is already retreating and preparing his next move. Then she gets a call from the green-haired man. He says the creature he was fighting is strangely retreating, as though it received some kind of order. On top of that, their leader has just ordered everyone to regroup. He wanted to kill the creature, but orders are absolute. Ichijo notices that these people are using some kind of special power, but it seems very different from what Shizuya uses. From the way they're talking, they seem to belong to some kind of team or organization. Still, the most important thing right now is finding out how the protagonist is doing. She heads toward the building entrance, while a strange red bird watches her. The next chapter opens with an update. It's been 102 hours since the shadow invasion began. Helicopters approach on a rescue mission. They've already been warned that they won't be able to save everyone there. One of the soldiers spots movement on top of a building and moves closer. When they land, there he is, our boy and his exhausted companion. Ichijo steps forward full of energy, but the soldier remarks that they aren't the man and woman he expected. The protagonist says he knows the guy is looking for Okamoto Takudo and Kumoto Akina. I skimmed ahead to figure out what that meant, but I guess it'll be revealed later. He explains that the two had gone to rescue some refugees and fought alongside him. He learned that through a radio message. The pilot nods, saying there hasn't been a single piece of good news since yesterday. They need to drop the two off somewhere safe soon because they have a mission nearby. Shizuya asks what the mission is, and the man says it isn't classified so he can tell him. As Shizuya probably suspects, Kaijo is on the front lines of the war against the shadows. Shizuya finds it strange that the man calls the monsters shadows, exactly what they're called in his system. Maybe someone else has access to the same information. He immediately asks the man to take him to Kaijo too. The guy warns him that it's extremely dangerous, but Shizuya gives him a sharp look and says he can help. The man agrees but asks what Shizuya plans to do there. Shizuya explains that he has important friends in the city to rescue and besides, he can handle himself. The man accepts the request. Later, Ichijo asks whether those friends are really so important, that he's willing to risk his life on the front lines. There must be a girl involved. He admits there is. She lives in Kaijo, and the rest of his friends have probably gone there too. Ichijo says she's jealous and wishes she had as many friends as he does. Then she says she's sleepy and asks to borrow his shoulder for a nap. The moment he closes his eyes to relax, he suddenly jolts awake. The pilot warns that they're approaching their destination, but they're under enemy fire. Shizuya looks out the window and sees missiles pounding the city from every direction, though strangely, there are no monsters in sight. On the ground, a squad of soldiers and tanks is firing when, out of nowhere, a magic circle appears beneath them, and they're impaled from below. Shizuya spots monsters positioned on a rooftop, acting exactly like players. Missiles are launched, the building explodes, and the target's elimination is confirmed. But then a massive dragon straight out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Attacks their helicopter, causing an explosion. The scene cuts to a giant hand hovering over a chessboard, moving one piece to capture another, then shifting a rook. At the same time, a titan-sized giant charges through the city, roaring and smashing everything in its path. Watching it all, Shuzui says there's another reason he came here, one he hasn't told anyone about. In Azure, this city was home to the first fortress players had to take down. The main battle would take place at the Great Tower. The helicopters are being torn apart, but one soldier shouts that they shouldn't underestimate humans because they have heavy weaponry. He keeps firing but misses every shot, complaining that the targeting radar isn't working. Shizuya tells him the enemy must have some kind of barrier, so they'll have to aim manually. Unfortunately, while human weapons are powerful, they all rely on technology, so any interference makes them useless. He calls out to Ichijo, saying there's no time to explain, and tells her to whistle. I'm not sure if that's the exact translation or if the text was wrong, but as soon as she says she understands, she's pushed straight out of the helicopter. Shizuria looks to the side and sees the dragon lunging in to bite him. He draws his knife and charges straight into its mouth. Somehow he turns back to the terrified pilot and yells at him to get out of there. Then he activates Flag of Courage again, and this time it does everything, even letting him fly. The battle in the sky becomes a full-on clash between dragons and missiles, until Shizuria swoops in and blasts one in the back with a lightning strike. He knew it would be hard to turn the tide alone, but he had to reach the ground. Yeah, that wasn't happening. A dragon's tail slams into him in midair, and now 4 or 5 more dragons are closing in. Before he knows it, they're biting him from all sides. The bastard is on the verge of blacking out. Thankfully, he manages to land a hit and break free. Out of nowhere, Haijo grabs his arm from atop a dragon. He demands to know what the hell she's doing there. She says she obviously came to save him. Just as she claimed earlier, when she whistles, these creatures seem to help her. Honestly, when she said her ability was better than his, he doubted her. But now he has to admit it's ridiculously overpowered. He explains, however, that the problem is this beast doesn't see him as an ally. The protagonist knows she won't die because in the game, griffins and dragons have a skill called Wisdom Bond. Whenever a player falls, they rush in to catch them. The problem is this particular dragon seems to deliberately hurl itself toward a building, probably to take Shizuya down with it. He immediately draws his sword, ready to deal with it, but Shijo tells him to wait. She speaks to the dragon and tells it not to be afraid. The person on its back saved her life, and he wouldn't hurt them. Watching this, Shizuya recalls that in the game, monsters were nothing more than sources of XP and loot. No one thought to interact with them, but there were a few unusual players like Ichijo. In fact, the more he thinks about it, the rarer she seems, even compared to him. Finally, the dragon flies over a lake and flips onto its back, sending both of them into the water. They quickly thank it before it flies off into the distance. The two idiots, soaked to the bone, climb out of the water and immediately build a campfire in the middle of the street. Why not inside a building? Maybe they have a death wish. Ichijo asks what they're going to do next. Shizuya explains that the shadows have advanced too far. Kodo District is already completely occupied. She asks where his friends are, and when he stands up, she instantly realizes they must be in that district and tells him not to go. It's suicide. He replies that the danger is exactly why he can't abandon them. When she says he never listens, he tells her she isn't coming with him this time. Naturally, she immediately says she is. Shadows don't attack her, so she's perfect for scouting the area. He insists it's too dangerous. Her power could fail at any moment. She tells him to stop making excuses because he knows her plan is better, then asks for a photo of his friends. Even though Shizuya doesn't want to admit it, she's right. He explains that the last time he saw them was about 2 years ago, then shows her a picture of the group posing for the camera. In the corner, a girl sits in an elegant chair, clearly from a wealthy family. As Ichijo points out, that's Hien Hitomi, the fairy-winged girl from the very beginning. Ichijo tells him not to worry because she'll find her. She grabs her phone, tells him to move aside, and lets out a whistle. The dragon swoops down, and she climbs on before taking off. Honestly, her plan is much better than his. Charging in head-on would have been suicide. The next chapter opens under clear skies. But down in the streets, knights are advancing toward the army, which is unleashing everything it has. Commander orders everyone to regroup in the parks so they can deploy the bombs. Snipers line up shots on enemy mages. Assassins slip in from behind, ready to strike the distracted soldiers. That's when Shizuya arrives and kicks one of them aside. A counter to the counter to the counter. He whips out his pistol, fires 5 or 6 shots, and the problem is solved. He immediately demands to know where the command post is and what the situation looks like. The guy gives him the information. Sure enough, just like in the game, the army's main stronghold is in the exact same place players were supposed to destroy in the enemy base. He immediately takes off running because, in theory, that's where humanity's core strength should be, and where he'll find people capable of fighting these creatures. For now, though, he's keeping his cards close to his chest because he doesn't know how they'll react to someone like him. He reaches the subway, which should still be operational because the monsters haven't reached it yet. But the moment he crosses a laser, a row of machine guns pops out, opening fire without hesitation. He raises his shield, manages to block the shots, pulls out his own machine gun, and takes care of them. But then an entire squad of soldiers appears. Our boy tells them to relax because he's just an ordinary human. The soldier explains that the special alarm only activates for creatures, then asks what's going on with his arm. The protagonist is confused. How do they already have a way to identify the shadows? This whole mess began only a few days ago. But with so many guns pointed at him, he simply says it's a long story and assures them he's human. Naturally, the soldiers don't believe him. Then he hears something strange, and when he looks back, cavalry is charging toward them. The soldier sees the chance to fire at him, hitting the incoming knights as a bonus, while he slips away after spotting that sneaky figure running off. It looks like that one plans to use the subway for some reason. That exact moment, a train passes through. He jumps down, lands on top, and rides it along the tracks. The army's alarm display shows an absurd number of creatures approaching. And the worst part? For some reason, those bastards are waiting for him at the next station, already aiming laser weapons in his direction. Once again, he has to raise his shield and tank the shots. Now it isn't just the monsters attacking him, but the humans too. Life isn't exactly easy for this guy. He hides behind a pillar, thinking it'll be difficult to escape without hurting anyone. Then suddenly someone claps their hands and orders a ceasefire. All the soldiers immediately obey, while the protagonist remains on guard. A man walks down, saying he investigated and it was clearly just a malfunction in the alarm system. He's certain this person isn't a shadow but an ally. When the protagonist sees the man, he wonders if it could really be him. We don't know who he means yet, but it is. The next chapter opens by saying it's been 144 hours since the shadow invasion began. At this moment, we're on the front lines at Resi's station. The blonde guy from earlier asks whether the boy planned to massacre everyone if he hadn't shown up. He replies that he's only there to seek cooperation. The blonde says he knows, and that he's interested in the boy because they seriously tried and failed to kill him. He should also understand that in wartime, sincerity alone isn't enough to convince anyone. Right then, an older man walks in and asks William if something happened, and whether the person beside him is another one of their comrades. William says calling him another one is an exaggeration. They aren't causing trouble, and besides, he'd never heard of the guy until today. He only arrived a few hours ago, and they're still getting acquainted. The old man asks if the protagonist is a tanker, and William comments on how amusing it is to see him getting used to gaming terms. The old man brushes it off, tells him to stop joking, and says they need to leave because a meeting is about to begin. William agrees and asks how many people to bring, and the old man answers 2. The scene shifts to a room where William tells our boy to take off his clothes, bathe, and put on the provided outfit because he can't meet the army dressed like that. The protagonist is about to respond, but William cuts him off, saying he knows the boy wants to exchange information, and he's willing to do that too. Shizuya knows that William's company is one of the 5 largest in the world. Founded over 200 years ago, it operates in finance, technology, robotics, medicine, and more. On top of that, it created the virtual reality game Azure. While picking up the clothes, he asks how much the SAM group actually knows about what's happening. William answers that it's far less than he probably thinks. The Shaos truly appeared out of nowhere across the world, and now everything is in chaos. Shizuya comments on him calling them shadows, and William says that's simply what his subordinates call them. He doesn't even know why. By now, Shizuya can tell these people won't share much. Still, he wants to know why they attacked him. Was it because they identified him as a shadow? William says yes, which Shizuya finds suspicious. It's only been a week since this began, yet they already have a system capable of identifying everything like that. He says the boy isn't as well informed as he thinks. The real game began 5 days ago, but the beta tests started more than 2 weeks earlier. The phenomenon began at specific points on the map, and every major organization in the world started sharing information. Shizuya finds that strange. How is that possible, and how did the public never find out? William explains that they controlled the information as much as possible. If people learned everything, it would cause even greater chaos. That only confuses Shizuya more. First, the military doesn't trust William. Second, William isn't sharing much. Third, he clearly knew about the shadows already and is hiding something. Shizuya says he could have prevented chaos and death by warning people sooner. William agrees and says there isn't much more to add. They only discovered it recently themselves. There were just 2 weeks between the first appearance and the full-scale attack, and they thought they had more time. The protagonist then opens the door and asks whether they're really going to register him as an alt-keeper. That's the group the military is forming from powerful individuals who can stand against the shadows. Of course, if he wasn't interested, no one would force him to join. Now it's his turn to provide details, but he doesn't reveal much either. He only says he knows little beyond the fact that he's connected to Azure. He also says he believes his arm resulted from coming into contact with a monster's core. In the game, it was called a signal. William says that's the perfect name. and immediately grabs his arm, remarking that the technology looks completely different. He'd like to study it. This guy is definitely peculiar. Luckily, a notification appears at that moment, and William says he has to leave, but warns the protagonist that they'll still need to talk more. This man is extremely famous in both the West and the East. His company practically runs half the world. He's a genius who gained immense power at a young age and created Azure Land. And Shizuge knows it's obvious that the person behind the game's development must have far more information than he's revealing. He can't afford to lower his guard for even a second. Next chapter explains that invasions began across the world, but the Shadow's main focus was the hazy region. All the attacks elsewhere were actually meant to scatter the forces that should have gathered there. The monsters' plan was obviously to strike at full force when their enemies were weakest. For now, they've set up several smekbers on the city's highest points and along the river crossing, which managed to halt the invasions. That has allowed them to hold most of the front line, and it's the only reason the first invasion of Hezai failed. Now they're reinforcing their defenses, gathering more troops, and watching the Shadow's movements. This man already makes me feel both love and hate. His ideas are great, even if the execution isn't always perfect. Still, the plan itself is solid. At that point, William raises his hand and says he has something to say. It isn't anything too serious, but he's curious about one thing. Can anyone there actually bring someone back to life? Everyone is shocked. And he says that of course they can't, but the Shadows can. Analysis has revealed two important facts about them. First is the armor covering their bodies. Normal attacks can't destroy it. And worse, breaking the armor doesn't defeat the Shadow because an energy circuit remains beneath it, serving as its true core. According to the man beside him, it's called the signal. Using the signal's properties, they can absorb matter and repair their armor. In other words, even if the armor is completely destroyed, they can rebuild themselves as long as the signal remains intact. What's this? The purple-haired guy jumps in, saying the information is interesting, but points out that they're there to discuss anti-shadow strategies, not research. He's clearly being a bit stupid because this information matters. The protagonist turns and says what the blonde guy means is that shadows can't be treated like humans. Any killing strategy that works on humans won't work the same way on them. I wonder if they'll devise some kind of containment strategy and keep them imprisoned. Considering these creatures can resurrect, that would be 200 IQ. Then again, they'd have to stop them from killing them. Okay, I'm getting distracted. Back to the story. The old man says it's true. Even if they outnumber them 1,000 to 1, they'll eventually lose if the creatures can resurrect. The blonde says they need to exploit their speed and the fact that they still have plenty of soldiers. The longer this drags on, the worse things will become. They'll keep losing people while the monsters gain the upper hand. Watching all this, the protagonist thinks that if the blonde's reasoning is sound, then this really is what they need to do. But he also senses another motive behind it all. At the very least, the strategy makes him realize the creature's plan is exactly the same one they used to invade the tower in the game. One important detail, though, is that in the game, to truly finish the dungeon, you naturally had to kill the boss. And back then he was the first person to defeat it in record time. If that's the case, then the Shadow's next move is. At that moment he seems to realize something. Meanwhile, William says they need to seize the initiative, destroy the Shadow's respawn points, and drive them off the land, but he's wearing that sly little smile. The protagonist then points toward a building and asks what that place is. The purple-haired army girl says it's the headquarters of a company called Ritson. Why does he ask? That immediately catches the protagonist's attention, and he wonders whether it's just a coincidence. Ritson building stands in the same place that was called the Tower of Melancholy in the game. Considering that, perhaps the company's president is actually the boss of that location. In the game, that boss was supposedly the lightning demon. The protagonist immediately asks about their defenses there, and whether there's been any suspicious activity. Strangely, the blonde guy grabs him, shoves him against the wall, and tells him to stay quiet for a moment. Well, that isn't suspicious at all. While he's still pinned against the wall, the old man says he understands their desire to take the initiative. The plan is settled, and that concludes today's meeting. Huh? Everyone is already leaving. Damn, our protagonist is about to object. Then, in the hallway, the blonde calls him an idiot and asks why he didn't say they needed to protect that place. William sighs and says he should have explained first. First of all, the connection between the game and reality hasn't been officially acknowledged. Even if they told the army, no one would take it seriously enough to mobilize all their troops based only on the two of them. Then he says something unclear about giving 99% of the people who don't know the game a fair chance, and that they didn't need to share everything. Shijuit is confused, but says the army is the only force capable of protecting Ritson. William, however, smiles and says maybe they aren't the only ones. At that moment, several helicopters begin landing, and the squad of hunters who are going to die without accomplishing anything arrives. At least they'll give our protagonist a chance to shine. He asks whether they're William's subordinates. This guy is making the same sinister face as Kira, smirking alone in his room, where his family can't hear him. One look at him, and you can see the evil in his eyes. But he turns around and says they're the trump card for protecting Ritson. The protagonist finds it strange. There aren't many of them for an attack of this scale, but William tells him not to underestimate them. According to his research, they possess powers similar to Shizuria's. No way, our guy has the cheat, was the game's top player, and has been farming since day one. Still, he wonders whether these people also possess the power of the signal. William calls them over, saying he'll introduce them to the others. Downstairs, he introduces Shizuka and says he's another person who carries the oath, probably the name of their power. Our boy watches the group approach, but all he notices is that the girl on the left has her underwear showing. The male mind is powerful and spots details instantly. William asks about the mission status, and the guy with the beaver in his mouth says it went well, though they ran into a few problems. William tells him to explain, and he says it was nothing serious. Captain Hashida simply let his guard down, so they were spotted much earlier than they should have been. Even so, no one was killed. The red-haired Hashida tells him to stop reporting every little thing to the boss. Looking closer, the guy has a large emblem on his back and says it's up to the boss to decide whether it was wrong. William simply yells at everyone to shut up. He praises their work and tells them all to go inside and rest. On top of that, he warns Hashia that they have plenty of people who could replace him as vice captain. He waves goodbye and says they'll speak again in an hour, while Hashia tells the emblem guy he'll pay for that. Poor man just stands there, thinking that leading a team is truly difficult. Then he walks past our boy and gives him a peculiar look. Wow, the guy stops and asks what he thinks he's doing there. The protagonist looks confused, and the guy removes his entire mask, asking whether he recognizes him. It turns out he's someone named Meiji-san. According to my list, Meiji-san is the healer from the very beginning, back in the first chapter, who smiles at our boy and says he never expected to find him somewhere like this. He explains how he ended up there, and our guy says William brought him. Meiji seems surprised that William took a liking to the kid and invited him, which our boy doubts is true in either sense. Still, Meiji says to forget about that. What he really wants to know is why the boy is with them. He says it's a long story and suggests they go somewhere else. The scene shifts to a bar with guards outside and hearts on the sign. What the heck? Is this an apocalyptic brothel? Unfortunately, the place is full of men. Inside, Meiji says he nearly died in the Sea of Yumashiro and was saved at the last second. Apparently, William rescued him, and he's been with the man ever since. Shizuya says he's glad to hear it, but adds that Meiji doesn't seem to be living very well. Meiji laughs, says there's simply too much chaos. He takes a sip of beer and says Hashia used to be the main captain, but he ended up killing countless allies, which isn't suspicious at all, so yes, he was demoted to vice captain. Our boy is digging for information now, and immediately asks how people have been awakening their abilities. That's when Meiji reveals that no one has awakened naturally. Instead, the SAM group has been transplanting shadow technology and circuits into people's bodies. But compared to the game, it's like controlling a character with almost no mana. That's because the supply is limited, and recovering energy requires returning to the SAM base. Shizuya says that explains why he's here. Suddenly, Hashida interrupts and asks what kind of conversation they're having with someone who isn't even part of the team. Meiji tells him to calm down and explains that William himself invited the kid. Hashida suddenly loses it, accusing him of betraying the boss. How is he betraying him? By talking behind his back. Now he's going to report everything. He's right in our guy's face and warns him not to even think about stealing his position as vice captain. Right then, Meiji smacks his own head and asks whether the idiot plans to defy the boss's orders again. Meanwhile, someone enters the bar, and the lovely woman we noticed earlier stands at the entrance watching. He asks where everyone is. She points to the side, where the whole commotion is unfolding. Hashida calls Meiji a filthy healer and says he should be leader because he's an incredible DPS mage. Suddenly, he breaks free from their grip and casts a fireball overhead, saying he'll demonstrate the power of the divine relic. Meiji is already moving to restrain the big M1 guy, while our protagonist wonders how a lunatic like this survived so long. William steps in and tells everyone to stop, causing Ashira to cancel the fireball. William immediately asks whether he understands what he's doing. Using abilities inside a military base is grounds for exile and expulsion. But the strange Hashira insists that the kid William brought is wandering around and spying inside the bar. William simply says he won't repeat himself. The boy is his friend. He tells Hashira never to doubt the kid again, and the fool starts trembling. Still, I don't trust that sneaky blonde for even a second. Hashida apologizes to the boy. and Meiji says it's fortunate the protagonist didn't have time to punch him. Shizuria, however, asks whether Meiji finds it strange. He'd never met that guy before, so why was he so hostile? Meiji says it's normal human behavior. Someone with little confidence becomes shaken after losing the authority he once had. He adds that the next mission is coming soon, and they can't afford to let that guy disrupt the team. William, however, asks them to be patient. The guy is new and hot-headed, but he only needs some guidance. He's a valuable ally, so they can't simply discard him. Our boy reluctantly agrees, and William places a hand on his shoulder, telling him to prepare too because they'll need him for the next mission. Meiji celebrates, saying he'll feel far more at ease with the protagonist beside him. The protagonist then asks what the next mission is, and Meiji explains that they're going to protect a certain Ritsune executive. He also says the company's headquarters stands exactly where the Tower of Melancholy was in the game. In theory, success would suppress a large portion of the shadows, but just like in the game, an ambush is almost certain. On top of that, it looks like even the boss himself will join the attack this time. Army officers say everyone is getting ready, and the girl with glasses remarks that it's strange. William appears to be gathering everyone with abilities. The old man is certain they're planning some kind of scheme behind the scenes. He asks about the plan, and she explains that the commander ordered them to use their powers only as a precaution. They aren't supposed to attack, only drive the monsters away. He also asks them to watch the SAM group's movements. So humanity is basically divided between the army and Blondie's group. Then there's our boy, who isn't really aligned with either side. As they walk through a destroyed section of the city, they know it's shadow territory now, and that an attack could come at any moment. They move through the subway, trying to avoid detection while William leads the way. That weirdo Hashida is still trying to figure out why the protagonist is there. Is he in love with him or something? Hey, look to the left, fall for her instead and stop bothering our guy. The thick-thighed ninja says the kid seems to be friends with the captain, so they shouldn't provoke him too much. Hashida says that if the kid weren't the captain's friend, he would have beaten him up already. Then the butler-looking man beside William asks whether he should punch Hashida in the face, and William replies, not yet. They have more important matters to handle. The protagonist notices Miki's expression change and asks what happened. Meiji says it's nothing, but yes, that looks suspicious. A little later they stop, and William says they've reached the Ritsun building. From this point on, the battle against the shadows begins. Everyone must prepare for combat, but remember that the objective is escort, not eliminating the target. He asks our boy whether he can count on him to watch his back, and he says yes. Meiji will be with him and assures everyone that the two of them are enough. The group moves out, and the protagonist knows that with all his gear and attributes, he's equivalent to a level 40 player. For now, to avoid problems and questions, he'll refrain from using the signal so he doesn't raise suspicion. But the shadow team is already on its way. They seem to sense a presence, and spot Meiji near the subway entrance. He immediately tells everyone to get ready because they're coming. It's literally like they're NPCs guarding the subway while enemies invade. Meiji bolts away while being chased, and hides beside our boy, calling for Hashida to cover him and telling everyone to cross the perimeter. The spiky-haired guy is now face to face with the knight. He leaps forward, tells it to die, and strikes. The creature blocks. The guy keeps up the pressure, unleashing a combo that leaves the monster able to do nothing but defend. Ida Meiji is impressed, saying the man becomes a completely different person with a sword in hand. Then he drives his blade into the shadow and says it's over. This one is finished. Right away, the thick-thighed ninja rushes in and lands 2 more sword strikes on its neck. The first target is eliminated. The protagonist praises Meiji's coordination, even though all Meiji really did was hide and shout, attack. But Meiji humbly says he learned everything by watching our boy serve as captain for so long, and that he's still only a beginner. Our boy insists that he's amazing and thanks him. A little bromance moment while everyone else is fighting. Come on, protagonist, give them a hand. At least they know that if an elite creature appears, their chances won't be good. And of course, one appears. A guy swinging a mace is already behind the ninja. Don't kill her. There are so many other people you could attack. Thankfully, she and another teammate dodge. Oh no, spoke too soon. A huge shielded enemy is approaching from behind. But the guy with the dreads charges in and smashes him into the wall. The strong ones have arrived. Alright, the protagonist still hasn't done anything. Just as they're about to move forward, someone in the sky starts casting a spell. Meiji instantly realizes it's one of the noble class reinforcements. Everyone tries to run, but the guy has already summoned some kind of dinosaur meteor. Hashida might be annoying as hell, but at least he's brave. He casts a fireball too, intending to make them collide, then throws it. Meiji is sure he's going to get himself killed doing that. Unfortunately, the other guy's fireball is much bigger than his, and he's about to take it straight to the face. It's a tragedy. But our Chad is going to save this idiot. He steps in to tank the hit, delivers a slash, and splits the massive rock. Meiji asks if he's alright, but of course the guy tells him to shut up. Still, he's practically sitting there comfortably, while our boy tells them to fall back. He'll handle this. He can easily deal with a noble at that level, so he activates that banner again. That's basically the only thing he uses. Then unleashes his zigzag skill, slicing straight through the creature, which falls in two. Up above, in one of the rooms, someone asks about Hashida's condition. Meiji is using a healing spell and is about to answer when suddenly, here comes a wrecking ball. The guy takes it square in the chest, but like a Marvel hero, he runs off, heals himself, throws himself in front of them, and tanks the hit for both of them. The problem is, obviously, a massive monster with a chainsaw has appeared. The thing is about as tall as the building. Everyone is hiding amid the debris. Oh, this is one of those sea golems, the same type our boy killed before that exploded. But Meiji points out that a sea golem wouldn't attack like this on its own. It's probably a tool or weapon controlled by someone else. The protagonist agrees, saying it's probably a special type of noble called a disturber. That's one of the production classes from the game. They don't have combat skills, but they can create giant golems, and that's how they fight. The problem is, these things are rare, especially one this strong, as expected from an elite level shadow. William understands the situation. A stronger shadow unit is attacking this place, and right then, another wrecking ball comes flying at everyone, followed by a chainsaw swipe that forces them all to duck. Shizuya says they have to retreat because the terrain here is terrible for them. He activates a defensive stance, raises his shield, and actually tanks the chainsaw strike with his chest. Meiji warns that he won't be able to hold on for long and tells everyone to use the chance to escape. Seeing everyone leave, our boy knows it's time to go all out. The chainsaw comes in for another strike, but this time he simply slides down to the floor below. The monster is swinging those wrecking balls everywhere, but then our boy fires an arrow that nearly clips its ear. The creature doesn't seem to care, and keeps swinging the wrecking balls while dragging the chainsaw across the building. Our boy summons a small shield and uses it like a board. Down below, the rest of the group is standing around like idiots, saying they should probably run now. But he says there's no way this thing will let them leave. Their only choice is to take it down here and now. He calls out to Meiji for support, saying he'll need his help. At least William orders the others to help as well. And of course, that bastard Ashida gets angry, saying the kid shouldn't be giving support orders. He'll show them how it's done. He tells everyone to back off and unleashes an explosion spell. Obviously the protagonist is still there and ends up scorched. Meiji asks what the hell he's doing, and he makes up an excuse, saying the kid moves around so much that he can't aim properly. Then he grabs him by the collar, saying Shizuya is their only hope, and he's ruining their chance of victory. While he's back there throwing sloppy spells around, the guy up front is risking his life. I still don't get how this guy hasn't died yet. Honestly, can we just kill him already? That poor kid got an entire tragic backstory just to take an arrow to the chest and drop dead, while this bastard has been a pain for 3 chapters straight. The golem charges forward, stomps down, and once again, Shizuya dodges, realizing its destructive power is insane. That's when Meiji tosses a small boot to our boy, granting him a speed buff. Another attack is coming, but this time Shizuya seems to vanish, reappearing on top of the boss's arm. At the same time, he activates a fragment of his magic book, firing 3 fireballs straight at its face. The monster acts like nothing happened, and simply swings its chainsaw arm around, hitting itself with a wrecking ball. But Shizuya senses he's now at the perfect distance and activates a quick mana strike that finally pierces the inside of the helmet. The thing stumbles, smashes through a wall, and collapses to the ground. Still, the protagonist knows that isn't its true weak point. He summons a bow, uses a technical shot, actually his barrage, and with that the creature finally seems to die, as he wonders whether he's getting close to. Being as strong as he was in the game, the idiots around him tremble in amazement that he took down the monster alone. While his friend praises his work, our guy is obviously more interested in the loot. He activates omniscience and omnipotence to steal the monster's abilities once again. The others warn him to be careful, saying that coming into contact with the creature's power is dangerous. He immediately realizes he's probably the only one who can manipulate these elements. The rest of the group arrives, and it seems everyone made it out without too much trouble. A while later, Meiji explains how everything happened. It all started on the day the shadows invaded. William's group quickly realized there was a connection between these monsters and the game at Azureland. That same day, they launched Project Prometheus to study the shadows. Damn, these guys move fast. With military cooperation, they managed to capture shadows and transplant parts of them into people. Seriously, their shadow GPT must have been working overtime to process everything this quickly. But they moved so fast that everyone who received a transplant died within 24 hours. Immediately afterward, they tried transplanting them into more resilient creatures, like whales and turtles, and it seemed to work. Once the circuit worked in a turtle, they could take that functioning version and put it into a human. The problem was that these circuits were defective and had far less power. Our protagonist points out the obvious. Even with 2 weeks of advance notice to prepare, all of this still happened far too quickly. He agrees but says he has no idea why. The only thing that happened to him was that he got lucky enough to receive one of the working transplants, but he knows nothing beyond that. He asks about our boy's strength, and Shizuya says all he can really do is absorb dropped items. Obviously, he's not going to tell even his friend about omissions and omnipotence. Meiji says he's clearly lucky, someone truly special. So far, he hasn't met anyone else who can equip circuits the same way they could in the game. That's when our boy reveals that, just like in the game, equipping an item that belonged to someone else gets him hunted for 7 days. Hearing that, Meiji asks if that's why he joined SEAM, and Shizuya says yes. Since he's going to be hunted, it's better to have people around him. In the game, information about the world was supposedly being hidden by the company in that tower. And since they're attacking Ritza now, they probably have important information for humanity that they want to keep secret. Meiji says that in that case they should head back. But Shizuya wants to know if he really thinks it's worth risking his life for the scene group. Meiji laughs, saying he's being overhyped. In the game, he only became famous because of our boy. In reality, he's just a regular, hardworking guy. There's nothing special about him. The fact that he managed to earn a spot in the scene group is already a dream come true. When he returns to the group, Hashira is sitting there and says, "Finally, the trash woke up." But his friend immediately tells the bastard to shut up, saying he only gets in the way of the mission and brings shame. Everyone keeps arguing until William tells them to be quiet. He answers a call, appears to agree with something, and then tells them to relax. The operation is going perfectly. They'll complete the sacrifice before they reach the Elder, surprising absolutely no one. This guy definitely has some kind of connection to the shadows. From the top of a building, our protagonist surveys the city and says he doesn't see anything suspicious. It looks like people live around here, but no one wants to turn on the lights and draw attention. William is pleased, saying that at least they don't seem to be in any danger. It's time for them to move deeper into Ritson. As they approach, a woman watches from a window. Pretty tall, she says it looks like some rats are coming in. As soon as they step inside, they find 2 different paths. And of course, like every smart team, they decide to split up. One group gets to die, while the protagonist group gets to live. By the time they reach the 5th floor, they still haven't found anything strange. Meiji's team is already on the 20th floor. It's empty there too. Hashida complains to Meiji, saying they should just head to the top floor already. Clearly, there's nothing in these rooms. Meiji tells him that if he wants to do that, he should talk to the captain, because Meiji isn't taking responsibility for it. But Hashida gets angry, slaps him, and accuses him of using the boss as a threat. Right then, they notice the phone starts sparking when it hits the floor, meaning something is interfering with their communications. On the 26th floor are the protagonist and the rest of his group. He says he hears a strange sound coming from behind a door. Everyone else says they don't hear anything, but our guy insists it sounds like Meiji's voice. William says the walls are thin, so it makes sense that he can hear it. But the protagonist knocks on them and says they feel like concrete, so that doesn't make sense. Plus, in a normal building, each floor should be 3 meters high, but here it seems to be only about 2.5. And when he passed through the stairwell earlier, those floors were indeed 3 meters high. William asks if he's suggesting there's some kind of empty space. He immediately orders someone to contact Sato, but of course their communications are now cut off. William orders everyone to fall back, saying the situation is suspicious. But at that moment, the walls start closing in from both sides, trapping them. Sleeping gas starts filling the space, and Shizuya apparently loses consciousness along with the others. That's when the redhead from earlier appears, ordering them to put everyone to sleep. After taking a flashbang to the face, our boy is told to wake up quickly as she demands to know who he is. Raggy opens his eyes and asks if this is their idea of hospitality. The one standing there moves closer and says that if he wants hospitality, he'll need to explain what's going on with his right hand. He shouldn't underestimate them, because they've also had contact with the shadows. Someone opens the door and calls for President Ayakawa. They introduce William as the young master of the SEAM group and a supporter of Ritson. Ayakawa immediately asks what someone as powerful as him is doing in her small company, but her companion cuts her off, saying that whatever the SEAM group wants to do, they have no reason to interfere. Apparently, she simply obeys and leaves, saying they'll pay for this. Meanwhile, our protagonist realizes William apparently had nothing to do with any of this. He gets up and the guy who entered earlier tells everyone else to leave. He wants to speak with William alone. As he leaves, Shizuya remembers that the Ritson company has a lot of information about players. He thanks the guy who untied him and asks if he can help him find someone. The guy agrees, asks for the name, and Shizuya says Heian Hitomi. The guard immediately runs off, shouting that he can look for anyone except her. The protagonist tells him to wait. Ayakawa, standing nearby, asks why he's interested in Heian Hitomi. He explains that she's a friend from the game, and he's curious about how she's doing. Ayakawa then asks if he's Kamahata Shizuya. She never imagined he would actually come all the way there looking for that person. She hands him a card and tells him to go to the 33rd floor, where she is. He asks if something happened, and she says he'll learn everything once he talks to her. On the way, he knows this is far too suspicious. He should be cautious because it could be a trap. He recalls that Hitomi's real-life personality was the most different from her personality in the game. He knocks on the door and asks if she's there. The door opens and there she is, completely unharmed. The downside is that she's in a wheelchair. In the game, she had the advantage of being able to fly, but that doesn't exist here. A little embarrassed, she asks him to come in and says she'll get him something to drink. He asks about her father and she says he's in Januza. As always, the protagonist notices that this is a subject she doesn't like to discuss. She says it's fine, since she's already told this story before. Apparently, when she was younger, she preferred being boyish rather than feminine. She wanted to practice martial arts, play sports, and so on. Her mother disliked that and tried to put her in dresses and give her dolls. But her father secretly took her to boxing lessons until the day she was left paralyzed. Seriously, what kind of boxing is that? Boxing where you just stand there and take a punch to the back of the neck. What is that? Honestly, I think her mother might have been right. In the end, it caused conflict in the family, and they were never able to reconcile. Sometime later, she discovered Azure Land and started making progress again, and her father was happy to see her enjoying herself once more. So he bought shares in Ritson, since they were involved with the game. And in the game, even without working legs, you could still walk. He thought that technology might one day be brought into reality. Basically, the boy walked into that room and got hit with emotional trauma. Shizuya seems to realize that the story is unfolding just as it did in the game during the Tower of Melancholy arc. What surprises him is that if Ayaka Wei is the head of the company, then she must be the final boss of this place. The strange part is that this company is already fully equipped with walls, traps, and everything else. That would only be possible if they'd been preparing for more than a year. That's exactly what everyone reading this mess of a story wants to know, how these people managed to prepare so much. The next chapter begins by describing a dungeon from Azure Land, an epic-level dungeon called the Tower of Melancholy. The Thunder Demon there was originally a merchant who went to that place to make money. She infiltrated the nobility using deadly tactics. No man could resist her power, and because of that her business kept growing. She would find a husband, make more money, leave him, and move on to the next. But her obsession with business made her neglect her family, and since she was involved with so many men, she naturally had children too. Unfortunately, her daughter contracted a fatal disease, so she hired a mage to help her. The mage was actually a demon. Huanan gave him all the support he needed to use his magic. In the end, however, it turned out to be a portal that brought in a flood of demons, destroying the entire place. Knowing all this, Shizuya tries to determine which merchant group in their world could match that backstory. Since her father's group is involved, they may be in some kind of danger. Right at that moment, a strange light fills the entire room. It's the alarm, warning that a group of shadows is smashing through the entrance door, which has just been broken down. Our boy immediately says the creatures are coming and they need to escape. Meanwhile, in another room, William is speaking with that man, telling him he brought the circuit as promised. But the man replies that he won't hand over all the Azure data for a single circuit. The man standing before him is actually Hitomi's father. William says that if he transplants this circuit into her body and it works, it will be the only way for her to regain the use of her legs. The father replies that William should know Ritson is everything he's spent the past 20 years building, and right now the employees he cares about are being attacked by shadows. When Meiji appears, William insists he has nothing to do with it, but the father replies that the company is worthless without its employees, so how is he supposed to help? Instead, he just stands there arguing with William. William gets up, saying this is his last chance to sell Ritson, and calls it a warning. The father replies that the company would lose all its value, so why is William still so interested? William simply turns and says this is the final warning. If he doesn't sell the company, everyone there will disappear. Just as he reaches for a pen, the ceiling begins to open, and a robotic hand appears and grabs him. William asks what he thinks he's doing, and the man warns that he never makes a deal unless he benefits from it. He presses a button, drops through the floor, and wishes William good luck. William starts shouting for help, and just then, someone bursts through the door and smashes the robotic hand. I thought William was going to be a major villain, but it turns out he's a 16 IQ lightweight. Everyone in this mess is an idiot. He orders them to find that bastard the father, no matter what. Meanwhile, on another floor, the army personnel are lined up in front of the elevator. As soon as the doors open, a shadow lunges for the first soldier's head, but an arrow flies in and sends the creature flying away. The protagonist tells everyone to follow him. They're getting out of there. The soldiers, however, ask where the rest of the group is. The protagonist calls William and the others, asking for help evacuating the people, but the blonde replies that the negotiation has been canceled and they no longer need to save anyone there. He tells the kid to focus on his own safety and meet the team in the garage. Since it's broadcast over the walkie-talkie, everyone hears it and starts shouting that the bastard boss abandoned not only them but also his own daughter. Damn. They swear that if the boss has abandoned them, he'll pay the price. These guys really should have come up with a different plan, because now the protagonist and William will have to deal with them. Meanwhile, the boss approaches Ayakawa from behind and asks how the circuit is coming along. She reveals that his suspicions were correct. The Seam Group never intended to buy them. It was all a bluff to steal their data. Obviously, their plan was to strengthen the circuits they already had, so they could fight the shadows. The circuit system and the game's connection to people seem to work very similarly to how they did in Azure Land. Their plan appears to be to bring in-game character traits into reality and synchronize them with real-world circuits. Their father thinks that will be impossible, but she says the people from that group apparently believe they can do it if they have enough data, and that's exactly why they want this company. He feels relieved. If those bastards had succeeded, they would have taken over the world. Ayakawa replies that they're now in the perfect position. They have the circuit and the player data. Her father stands there smiling, clearly about to be betrayed by this woman, when she takes the suitcase from his hand and says she's going to examine the circuit. He tells her to wait, but in that moment, he's restrained. He asks Ayakawa what she thinks she's doing, and she replies that after all the trouble she's gone through, there's no way his incompetent daughter will be the one who benefits. Meanwhile, on the lower floors, low-level shadows are trying to advance. The guy is blasting them all with his pistol. He warns that the elevator is dangerous and tells everyone to run for the stairs. Watching this, William tells Hitomi that he's done his part. Now it's her turn. Everyone should be taken to the secret room. She must also be curious about what's in that place that made her father abandon her like this. Meanwhile, in what must be the secret room, her father tells Ayakawa to stop, but she simply replies that she's no longer his subordinate. The system announces that something is being installed, and she smiles, saying she's about to become a player. But then a message appears saying no information was found. She doesn't understand why, until her father smugly tells her that he extracted the data before handing it over. At that moment, Ayakawa realizes the bastard had suspected her from the start. He tells her it looks like he was right to suspect her, since she betrayed him. He reaches for his weapon, but he draws first and fires several shots at him. Of course, the sound attracts the shadows outside. He tells Ayakawa to stop acting insane, warning that at this rate they'll both die. He draws his gun too, but right then the wall behind her explodes. An archer, the one who broke it down, fires a second arrow that tears through her body. She collapses instantly. Her father draws his weapon and fires. It does nothing against their armor. He yells at the creatures not to come any closer, not that they would listen. At least something seems to be aiming at them. He asks what they think they're doing, and one of the archers fires an arrow toward the ceiling, passing just behind the protagonist and his team. In his memory, he turns and sees the hulking monster with its back to them, moving in to kill her father. The poor man keeps firing bullets that do nothing, but just then the protagonist drops down from above while the man cries in desperation, thinking this is the end. He's lucky that our boy aims for the sword instead of the neck, redirecting the attack and saving him. These creatures are elite monsters between level 20 and 30. Meiji buffs our boy, who charges in, saying he'll draw the archer's attention while the others protect the man. Meiji uses some chain abilities to help while our boy finds himself between the two enemies. The knight is trapped in the chains and our boy cuts down what appears to be the archer, but then Meiji comes under attack and raises a barrier just in time. The protagonist leaps in, activates that lion slash, and spins behind the knight, striking him down instantly. Meiji breathes a sigh of relief, saying that compared to what they faced in the game, this was theoretically easy. At that moment, someone calls out to Januza, Hitomi's father. It's William, who says Januza had apparently planned this from the start. Januza seems genuinely happy that everyone is okay. He rushes to his daughter, telling her he's obtained the information needed to make her walk again. Now it all makes sense. In the game, there was a woman with a sick daughter she wanted to cure, and here we have a desperate father trying to cure his daughter. For some reason, I'm only now connecting the dots. You might wonder whether they should recover the circuit, but William says it's fine, they'll have more chances later. Hitomi, however, says it's alright, and that someone else should use it. Her father begs her not to say that, since he did all of this for her, but she cries, saying the circuit won't help her now that her mother is already gone. Hitomi, just use the thing already. Get your fairy powers and help the protagonist for the love of God. Because while you're caught up in all this drama, a message arrives saying more and more shadows are attacking the building. William desperately tells the team to hold the line because they're on their way. Then he turns and says they'll talk later. Shamusette, however, tells them to wait. He knows a shortcut to the garage. Downstairs, cars are being smashed to pieces, while the army personnel run for their lives. The only ones holding the line are the group William brought with him. Then a perfect fireball slams into one of the shadows. The protagonist apologizes for being late while William checks the map and says that exit is no longer usable. He tells Miji and the others to buy some time. They simply reply, got it. But then another soldier runs in and reports that exit B has also been sealed off. An instant later, an arrow flies in and impales him. A gang comes rushing into the garage, and the worst part is that William seems to be alone there. He doesn't know why, but the protagonist realizes it's because of the arrow the archer fired upward. It was a signal calling their allies in. In the end, these guys are after the data they have in Ganuza. In the next chapter, William asks the army personnel where the backup they need is. The older officer replies that they also need to minimize casualties. He can't expect to scheme behind their backs and still receive full military support. The army isn't his personal strike force. Clearly shaken, William realizes that in the end, the army has betrayed them too. The general warns them to be careful. Countless shadows are converging on the area. In less than 2 hours, the place will be overrun. William's older friend asks why they want to abandon everyone here, but the general only says he's minimizing casualties. Living soldiers are better than dead ones, so they should begin the evacuation immediately. Obviously, William knows that's just an excuse, especially since it will be difficult for any of them to escape alive. Still, with no better option, he tells the group to protect him and start clearing a path to exit B. That's where everyone will have to escape. Everyone agrees, and Hashida unleashes a barrage of fire to open the way, saying he'll handle those enemies himself. 2 shadows advance, but their expressions change instantly. Luckily, Meiji still has his overpowered barrier. As always, he grabs Hashida by the collar, telling him to stop being an idiot, and breaking formation. The protagonist summons a lightning storm and activates the Banner of Courage. Everyone gains more health, more defense, and 20% more movement speed. With that, the beautiful little ninja slashes through enemies, while the dreadlock guy, whose name I still don't know, lands a solid punch. A few cuts here, a lion slash there, and it looks like they're making progress. The army is impressed, and Junuza praises Hitomi for having such strong friends in the game. He swears that if they make it out alive, he'll do his best to put everything behind them and support her. Hitomi, however, doesn't look too excited. Girl, let's do the transplant first. Start walking, and then you can stage your rebellion. Watching the whole battle, William and Otto comment that the group's coordination is perfect. It's even a little intimidating. William knows it will be difficult to keep Shizuya under control because the man beside him says they must be careful. They don't understand how that kid's circuit works, and he may be hiding something. In the middle of their conversation, several helicopters approach the buildings. Someone gives the order to exterminate all enemies. Machine guns and missiles open fire, with explosions tearing up the ground as the shadows try to flee. But of course, an arrow as powerful as a cannon pierces straight through a helicopter, sending it crashing down. The rest of the ground troops are still arriving. Who ordered all of this? I think it was that army guy who supposedly betrayed them. Maybe he's actually giving them a chance to escape. Oh right, he was the one who ordered the evacuation and abandoned everyone in the city. William tells everyone they have 5 minutes to finish off this shadow and get out of there. The protagonist is in the zone, firing an arrow into one's chest and punching another, and they're already close to reaching exit B. Finally, there are no shadows in front of them. Spoke too soon. Suddenly, a mage in green robes appears, clearly not an average monster. Shizuya finds it extremely strange that a mage would come down to ground level. The creature immediately raises its staff, and a storm of fireballs rains down. The entire parking area erupts in explosions. He warns everyone to be careful. The monster is trying to set everything on fire. He cuts through the middle of the barrage and fires a shot at the enemy. But in an instant, the creature seems to vanish. And of course, in a parking lot full of exploding cars and fireballs hitting everything. Gasoline is spilling everywhere. The enemy fires an arrow straight toward it. With no other choice, the protagonist activates Lion Slash and throws himself into the path of the attack, seemingly cutting it down the middle, or something close to that. The building begins to collapse. Her father carries his daughter as everyone sprints, with smoke pouring everywhere, and they finally make it outside. The army soldiers tell them to move quickly, saying many people died along the way to save them. With that, the vehicles begin fleeing the city. Chinuza looks back and sees the company he spent 20 years building collapse. The shadows have truly invaded and taken over the city. William tells him not to worry. As long as the Seam group remains standing, they can rebuild everything. The father understands that all they really want is the data, but there's no time to discuss it. A fireball slams into the car. It was too easy, obviously. Another barrage is coming. One of the creatures drops from the sky, and this one is definitely an elite. The protagonist climbs out of the overturned car, dazed, and spots an ancient shadow approaching. The very thing he feared most has arrived. Soldiers open fire, but it's like wind hitting the creature, completely useless. The protagonist hesitates, trying to see what the monster will do. It draws its sword and unleashes a slash that kills 4 or 5 people instantly. He tells the army not to get involved. The group will handle it, and William does absolutely nothing. I thought this guy would be a strong leader in battle, but apparently he only gives orders. He tells the group that the time has come to prove themselves. Meiji agrees and starts raising his mana shield. The attack instantly shatters his magic. Meanwhile, Hashira charges in and tries one of his solo attacks. The boss could easily slice him in half, a small favor we certainly wouldn't mind. But unfortunately, it simply slams its sword into the ground, canceling the fireballs and sending him flying. The group wants to rush in recklessly, but our boy tells them to wait. Charging in without thinking won't work. They ask what they should do, and he tells them to hold off the boss until everyone has evacuated. They agree and he advances, firing several quick mana shots. The enemy blocks them with its sword, and just then, the little ninja attacks from one side. The dreadlocked fighter comes from the other side with a punch, while the big sword wielder attacks from above. But the boss counters with a sweeping sword slash, sending one strike toward each of them. While they hold the boss back, the army retreats with Hitomi. Her father is smiling far too much, and honestly I don't know how he's still alive. He has that perfect about to die look. The ancient shadow seems to have its eyes on them. The father notices its gaze, and right then the shadow lunges toward them. Everyone panics, and the protagonist appears behind it, activating Lion's Slash and forcing the boss to stop and defend. The monster extends its sword, marking the protagonist as its main target. They're locked in a stare like an old western showdown. What's this? An ancient shadow level 99. Damn, our boy realizes how ridiculous this is. If he faces it head on at full power, he won't last even a minute. Maybe the best plan is to distract it and buy time for everyone else. He activates an ability in his hand, lifts a chunk of stone and hurls it at the boss. The monster easily slices it in half, and amid the explosion, our boy is already making a run for it. The boss notices and sends more slashes flying his way. He's already inside a building, but even then the attack cuts clean through it. The building starts collapsing, while the thick-thighed ninja wants to rush in and help him. Meiji, however, tells her to trust him. Hashiga, on the other hand, is convinced that if even that guy stands no chance, everyone here will die. Meiji tells them to use this chance to retreat. Shizuya is buying them time, but they refuse. As members of the army, they can't just abandon their comrades. Man, I thought Meiji trusted our boy, but he's standing there thinking, what a shame. He thought the kid would play a much bigger role in this story. I honestly believed he was a loyal friend, but nope. He just left our boy there and went to talk to the boss. Meanwhile, of course, Hitomi wants to know where Shizuya is. He tells her that Shizuya is fighting an ancient shadow and might not return. Januza says that in a world like this, death is common. But Hitomi refuses to accept that. They can't abandon Shizuya like this, and he's not the type to die so easily. At least someone believes in our boy. William apparently agrees, not because he thinks our boy is that capable, but because they're surrounded on all sides. It's better to keep as many people alive as possible. Meiji asks where the army is. Are they being abandoned? One soldier tries to brush it off, saying more reinforcements are coming. Januza, however, remarks that it looks like everything will end here. At that point, William says the solution is for Januza to hand over the power he possesses. In other words, they must install all the circuit information to maximize everyone's strength. Since it's their only hope, there's no way he'd refuse. Everyone turns to Januza, telling him to stop thinking only about personal gain. After hesitating for a moment, he shouts fine, he'll hand over all the data. William thanks him, saying humanity finally has a chance. Now they just need a human pillar. Januza asks him to explain, and William says it's obvious. They don't know what effect the data will have, and the process is extremely risky. Countless people have died during circuit tests so far. That's why they need one person to serve as the test subject. He wants to know who will take the risk. Oh God, Hashida says he'll do it. In a perfect world, he'd go insane and die. But in the imperfect world, meaning every single time, he'll survive, grow stronger, and become even more annoying. Strangely, everyone seems interested. The dreadlocked guy says it sounds super cool. If someone's going to sacrifice themselves, he wants in too. The thick-thighed ninja also joins in. By the way, she wasn't wearing those black pants before. The artist nerfed her. Who did this? Now everyone's competing, even willing to settle it with rock, paper, scissors. But Meiji tells them all to shut up. Since he's the captain, he'll be the one to do it. Ashigote, of course, grabs him by the collar, insisting that he should be the one to go. But after all that back and forth, the obvious happens. Hitomi volunteers. Her argument is simple. She's in a wheelchair, so if it works, they gain someone who can help a lot. If it fails, they lose someone who, as she puts it, isn't very useful right now anyway. The scenes cuts to the boss surveying the terrain, climbing higher, and driving another sword strike into the ground. Amid the rubble, beneath the moonlight, he looks down and lets out a roar. Apparently he's searching for our protagonist, who slipped away underground. Amid all the commotion, Januza says there's no way he'll risk his daughter, but she replies that her body would finally be useful. No one here would make a better human pillar than her. The soldiers hesitate, unwilling to place that responsibility on her. Then someone says this is wrong. It's the protagonist, showing up completely battered. William celebrates the fact that he's alive, while Meiji gets all emotional. Why though? You abandoned him. You're the healer who creates barriers, yet you didn't do a thing. Shizuria says there's only one person who can save everyone here. At that moment, he points and says it's Januza himself. He should have already realized that the shadows see him as their main target. The man says none of this makes sense, but the soldiers agree, saying the monsters haven't stopped coming since they got near him. The protagonist tells everyone to shut up. William then asks why it has to be Januza. Shizuya tells them to remember that the world has become identical to the game Asura. In that game, the player's final goal is to kill the tower's boss. That's when it clicks for William. Januza was the boss of this company, which is why he's being targeted. The strange thing is Januza isn't part of the government, he isn't strong, and he isn't rich. Basically, there's nothing special about him, so why him? The protagonist says it's obvious. This man is carrying the information the monsters need most. And according to the game's logic, if he obtains that data, he'll become the thunder god of the region. Januza staggers back in disbelief, saying that's impossible. But suddenly he starts laughing wildly, saying this must be what they call karma. William tells him to calm down. The future of the entire city of Kaju now rests on his shoulders. Januza rises and says, fine, he'll take responsibility, since the city ended up this way because of him. He then tells them about a man who approached him a year ago and offered to buy Azure Land. He thought it was suspicious, but the amount of money was absurd, far too much to refuse. The protagonist asks if he sold information about the game. Januza says yes, because the offer was far too lucrative to turn down. At least he wasn't completely foolish. He kept the most important information to himself. He asks what this person looked like. Januza explains that the man was disguised, so he never saw his face. Honestly, I have a feeling it was William himself in disguise. I don't know, I just have that sense. Minjiva comments that maybe all of this happened because of the data, though I don't think that makes much sense. Still, Januza tells them to leave it to him. He'll become the ultimate human pillar. He then tells Satomi that he isn't coming back, and hopes she'll be alright before leaving. He apologizes, saying all he ever wanted was for her to live a normal life. Finally, the girl cries out for her father. William then says it's time to begin. Everyone gathers in front of a stone. Januza has the device attached to his arm, and the circuit transplant begins. The data is installed, and immediately afterward the process is complete. Everyone remains silent, and suddenly his eyes turn blue as lightning strikes down from the sky. The protagonist calls out to him, but he's already gone wild, creating a gigantic ball of energy, while everyone else is already 5 blocks away. Then we cut back to see what happened. They let him explode, then return to take a look. Seeing that massive ball of energy, Atomi calls out to her father. The protagonist is thrilled. It was a complete success and the man had become the thunder god. William praises him, saying the man has carved his name into history. Someone is watching from far away. Another one of those relentless shadows is on the move, and it isn't merely following. It's already charging forward, destroying everything in its path. At the same time, William calls out for Januza, who emerges, and damn, he really has turned into the final boss. Right now, he looks more like an enemy. William's buddies start trash talking, saying he may look strong, but with how dumb he is and without any combat experience, he'll be useless. But then the man himself tells everyone to shut up and tells Hitomi to climb onto him. She calls out for her father, but he's gone just like that. William tells everyone to prepare and watch out for a surprise attack, then asks the protagonist not to let Hitomi run off. Right then, the shadow approaches and gets smashed by a hammer strike. It defends itself as electricity, flies everywhere, and Januza hovers in the sky like Thor. The two face each other, and the clueless one asks if they even stand a chance. Shizuya says of course, they have the boss on their side. Yeah, maybe you should help the boss instead of letting him get beaten by this monster, only to step in later like your son Jinwoo. A massive lightning strike erupts. The monster simply counters it and sends it back. Jinwoo's dodges. The monster absorbs his energy, exactly as expected from a shadow like this. It charges forward and slams into his chest. Honestly, it feels like the protagonist is just trying to farm that aura. William comments on how strange this is. Why is the boss getting beaten? Shizuya explains that he can't control his power. And why did you think he rushed in, you idiot? Now they're face to face, and the monster is ready to finish him. With its sword raised, Hitomi screams no, remembering her father bringing her cake and calling her mother, even though her mother had already left. Out of nowhere, he cries beneath the raised sword, apologizes to his daughter, and unleashes a massive bolt of lightning from his body. The shadow staggers backward, and Jinuza stands tall again. Wow, so he was just being dramatic. Another hammer strike follows. This time the shadow raises its shield, but it shatters instantly. The monster is sent flying, and Jinuza leaps after it to finish the fight, causing another massive explosion as smoke billows into the air. The protagonist is left wondering what kind of intense brawl is happening here. The next chapter begins with a soldier saying the crisis in Kaiju is over. They won? Did the man die? As always, the enemy has changed. William is about to celebrate, but the soldier says they'll only be allowed to leave if they surrender everything they've gained, including the people he's empowered and the technology he's acquired. If they hand it all over, they still aren't leaving the city. William says they don't need to go down that path. They could still be partners. Besides, if the man wants him to bring Januza along, that will be difficult. The soldier simply hangs up on him. A friend asks what they're going to do, and they all agree there's no way they're handing Januza over. Then a swarm of helicopters arrives. Every time I see a scene like this, I think humans could never be this stupid. Then I remember reality and think, yeah, they could. Itomi stands there shaken when 3 massive darts slam into her father's back. Shizuya immediately recognizes them as tranquilizer darts. The soldiers approach, ordering their forces to close in and capture him. She screams, asking what they're trying to do to her father after he just saved Kaiju City. But they only reply that they're following orders. The protagonist warns them that they'd better back off, because Januza isn't someone they can handle. Like every generic copy-paste character, they're eager to die and charge straight in. Of course, Januza activates his lightning, glares at them, and the protagonist tells him to stay back, but it's already too late. Lightning rains down on the helicopters. The poor soldiers fire their rifles, but it's useless. They even bring out a cannon, firing a bazooka round straight at him. It explodes against his chest. Yet of course, he's completely unharmed. And there he is, Chad Ganuza, staring down the entire army. Clearly they're nothing but a bunch of idiots, wasting the few troops humanity still has left. His daughter wants to know why this is happening. Her father protected the city, but William explains that to the military, any entity they can't control is far too dangerous to leave alive. Then William's friend says they have a problem. The circuit monitor is showing several red signals, meaning Januza is starting to lose control. That was always a possibility, and now the military is attacking him, forcing him to use even more power and making things worse. William says there are only 2 possible outcomes. Either his energy will keep growing until he explodes, or he'll completely lose his mind. He warns the general that if he wants to avoid total annihilation, he'd better order a retreat. But the bastards reply that they won't lose to this little monster they created. William's friend is over there saying, hey, General 16 IQ, you idiot, we've already lost a ton of people. But the jerk slams the table and tells him to shut up. If they can't defeat the monster, everyone will think the Seam Group killed the Shadows, and the military will lose all morale. In other words, they're trying to hide the truth by firing 500 bazookas at Januza, who stands there with electricity crackling around his body, while Hitomi asks the protagonist what's happening. He realizes Januza is undergoing another transformation. Then a laser blast strikes him directly in the head, landing a clean hit, just like in this video.